people in our community, in the city, they want to become actors or entertainers, and that's all they see. And you grew up in the inner city ghetto like us, but you took a different path. And they said, what you need to do is show people that there are other options. And so that was the basis of really writing the book, really to inspire people like myself who grew up in there to say there are other possibilities. Because oftentimes in my project, I didn't see anyone other than people who were selling drugs, entertainers and rappers and athletes who made it out, but very few. So the book is really to inspire people like me and people who grew up in rural America as well, because they got to stand up against one another. But the reality is society failed us both. We don't have the resources, right, in rural or urban America. And so I think it's important for us to come together and really fight for the resources. As a kid, people who grew up in privileged communities, and where I grew up in New York City, are no smarter than me. I learned that real early on. They just have resources we don't have. So if you give us the resources with the challenges that we have to go through, we'll probably exceed where they are, right? So I think it's about inspiring people. It's about also the book. It's about giving privileged people proximity. Because there are some good people out there. Proximity to what it's like to grow up in the inner city, right? And the challenges that we're confronted. Because when you give good people who are privileged proximity, it breeds empathy. And with empathy, they'll help. And that's why we're calling help for face-to-face. Because what they're doing is really giving the tools that's necessary for people to reach their potential. And that's what we want, right? So I think that's another reason. And another thing is that people who grow up like myself, and even people in rural America who I speak to, they have a story, but they don't share their story. In corporate America, people ask me on a daily basis, publicists, PR, why are you telling that story about yourself when you sit in the vice chairman of the number one company in the world? Wouldn't people look at you differently? Well, people do, right? And people at Microsoft do, because they had no idea. They said, you went to Georgetown University Law School. We thought you were different. We didn't think you were a poor kid who was on public assistance all your life, who lived in the projects and who stole things, right? Just so you could help your family make their way through. But I think it's important for me to tell that story, because when you meet, particularly when I talk to young people, I say, I'm you and you're me. I was you when I was your age. So you should look at me as the possibilities and that you can be better. Because I'm no different. I wasn't supposed to be where I am today, by any standards of anyone's imagination. Because society has it stacked against you. But if you wait for society to change, and it will at some point, you'll be left behind. So you have to fight your way through it. And part of it is being able to see people who grew up like you, who look like you, who have made it. Because what you see and believe you can achieve, if you don't see it, you don't think it's possible. So those are the reasons I kind of wrote the book.
Thank you. Okay. So I think we answered a lot of the questions I get prepared for you, but what's really important for us to hear about is first a question. How is your day-to-day at your job? What do you do? What's it?
Well, it changed. I've been at Microsoft now for 24 years. So initially, I was a part of the team that developed, many of you may know it, the Windows Media Player. So at that point, we developed that tool so people can listen to and play music. So I was a part of that team. Then I ended up supporting the entire U.S. sales team, which is a $20 billion business. And imagine, a poor kid from the projects supporting $20 billion. It's unheard of. They didn't know I grew up in the projects before I had that job. But now they do. But nonetheless, we were successful at supporting that. And I made sure that the team that I had was very diverse with women and people of color, extremely diverse. So I think that's important. I'm an advocate for that. So then I ended up supporting at Microsoft a $15 billion team. And I switched because there was an African-American woman as the president. I thought it was extremely important when she and I were walking in a meeting together. They see a black woman supporting $15 billion with a lead attorney supporting it. So I did that switch. And when she left my current job, I went to the vice chairman and said, I want to do something different. I don't want to support sales anymore. I want to do something community-based. with other companies so we can provide services for the underserved community, as well as be the executive in New York, really. With my relationship with the administration, if there's any issues, I can make a call and help Microsoft do whatever it is.
Thank you. And I know you talk about what happened when you were 10, right? Could you kind of tell us a little bit about it? It was life-changing.
Right, what you're talking about. I was born in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. It's not the Crown Heights you know today. It's gentrified now. It's a poor African-American community. Poor, we all were poor, but we didn't know we were poor. When you live amongst poor people, you have no idea you're poor until you see something different. So we moved from there, and we moved to the projects, and that's public housing projects. And directly across the street from my projects was Lincoln Center, so it was wealthy people. So that's when I realized for the first time I was poor. So my mother taught us immediately how to travel from Manhattan to Brooklyn by train. So in this one instance, I must have made the trip a dozen times myself, individually. This one time I was 10 years old. So I took the train to go to Brooklyn to see my grandmother. And what happened was on the platform, the cop said, "There he is." And in New York, you don't pay attention to that. And I said it again, I looked, and he said, "There he is," and it's a Caucasian man with him, saying, "What are you waiting for?" So he started to walk in my direction. So what do you do when you're 10 years old? People just don't understand. You run from the cop. And so that's exactly what I did, but the only place for me to run was to have to jump on the track in front of the train. The train would stop, stepped over the third rail, which is the electrical rail that powered the train station, got on the platform, and went from one station underground to the other. Little known to me, by the time I got to the other station, there was 4 cops there. And they said, "You're under arrest." And I said, "Why?" They didn't tell me immediately, but when they took me to the precinct, they finally said, "You stole something, and we have witnesses that you stole something." And I said, "No, I didn't." Of course, I'm crying because I'm with cops. And so then they said, "Well, listen, if you said you did it, you get to go home." And that was a great deal on the surface. And for some reason, I don't know why, people ask me why today, why I said I didn't, I still said I didn't do it. But I came very close because the deal was to go to my mother and my grandmother and sit here with strangers. And all I had to do was admit that I had committed a crime that I didn't do. And if I did, I wouldn't be here today. And I talk about that in my book because that still happens today. It still happens today. In fact, I got arrested as a Microsoft attorney. I got arrested twice and spent the night in jail as an attorney, and I let Microsoft know it as well, because racism exists, right? People have stereotypes, and I realize people say, "You still think you get arrested?" Absolutely, because I don't dress like this every day. I'm in jeans and sneakers, and no one's asking me how much money I got in the bank, how long I was with Microsoft, what type of deals I closed. One time I closed a $100 million deal, celebrated with people at Microsoft. Then I said I'm going to celebrate with people in the projects I grew up with. And I went to the projects, and we got some crabs and beers to celebrate. And as soon as I pulled up, the cop stopped me, and then I spent the night in jail. So that sort of thing happened. So the 10-year-old incident, yeah, I think that happens, and it just, because at that point, I'm pro-police, but I realize what happens from a discrimination standpoint when you put people, give them the power to do certain things, right? So, and I've always realized that. So people say when I run now, no, I'll fall to the ground. But at 10, I had no choice in my mind but to run because I saw the inequities that exist in my community when they were confronted with the police.
I think this is something that you've talked about a lot and probably present, maybe you don't say it enough, is many challenges you have, that there are a lot of strength that came out of the challenges. Then you even talk about starting a newspaper business. Talk about that strength and the number of strength that you used in spite of the challenges you went through.
I think, well, I'll take you back. Certainly, the newspaper business was, come on, I could have sold drugs. It was certainly not. My friends were going to jail or getting killed, and I said, I don't want to engage in that. But you look for other ways to make money. So what I did was, it wasn't your normal newspaper run. I would get up early in the morning in New York City, drop it off at several locations, and we would pick it up. And I would recruit people from Brooklyn to come on Sundays because newspapers were a lot more. And we would just go pick them up around the city. And then we would sell them and make money. And in fact, some of my friends were able to buy boom boxes back then, those were big boxes. I was able to buy first color television and food and clothes, right? Because you're poor. So you don't do those type of things because you just want to do it. You're doing it as a means of survival because the resources are not in your community, right? So I understand, I'm empathetic to some of the things that take place. And I talk about that as a Microsoft attorney in the book because the idea is, yeah, people want to look at me differently, but I'm trying to inspire them. So I got to tell them that, hey, listen, we got more in common than you think. Don't be fooled by the fact that I went to Georgetown. I worked for Microsoft for 24 years. Like I said, I shouldn't be here. So I just want to connect with them and say, hey, listen, there's a connection in terms of story. So if I can do it, you can do it too. You're no different. So I think in terms of, in high school, what I did, it was a bad choice academically, but a great choice because it kept me off the street. We have what's known as the co-op program. You work when we go to school one week. And so I did it, but I went to one of the worst high schools in New York City. And that's when my teachers were like, you're not college material. But I had, some said I wasn't, but some says you can do it. And that's what you need. You got to be able to knock out all the negative noise and focus on the positive, right? And stay away from the negative people. So doing that, when it came time to go to college, because I really went to high school part-time for all practical purposes. By the time I got to college, I was only able to get into college through a special program that was designed for students who were academically and financially disadvantaged. Other than that, I wouldn't have been in college. And I had to complete a summer program. And 2 weeks of that summer program, after 2 weeks, I called my mother and said, Mom, I can't do this. It rained. I'm not ready for this. And she said, you sure? But ultimately, my mother said, come home, because she didn't want to see her son in a great deal of pain. And so she said, come home. But then I had to call my aunt, who was the matriarch of the family. And she said, I already heard that you want to come home. What do you want to do? You want to go back to the projects? And at that point, my mind was made up. I said, maybe. She said, do you want to work in that part-time job that you had when you were in high school at Chase Manhattan making copies in the basement? I said, maybe. And so she said, you know what? You're not coming home. She said, I'm going to tell you why. And this is my motivation. You got to find purpose in life. Like, what's going to drive you? And she said, Bruce, your grandmother picked cotton, I picked cotton, and your mother picked cotton. We couldn't look white people in the face in South Carolina. We had to dress them, yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir. And she said, no one in the Jackson family ever graduated. And she hung up the phone. So I was more afraid to deal with her than the challenges that I had to endure and to stay. But that's my source of strength. Because I said, I'm going to pay back these people who did that to my grandmother, to my mother, to my aunt. It wasn't for me anymore. And that's why you got to find it. Sometimes your purpose is not for you. It could be for your kids. It could be for your parents. You got to find that source of purpose because that's your strength. And even when I started my firm at Microsoft, I said, okay, I don't know technology, but I can't fail because too many people are counting on me. My mother, my aunt, my kids at this point, right? I could not afford to fail. Too many people are counting on me to be successful. So you got to find whatever that purpose is to you, because, and it doesn't have to be. In most cases, it wasn't me. If it was just me doing it for myself, I would have quit a long time ago, because it's too hard. But when you're doing it for a purpose or someone else, you have no choice but to go forward.
Thank you. I think what you keep talking about is this having hope in spite of challenges, right? You find it in different places. It's not the same for everyone.
Right.
Right, you find that. And it sounds really simple when you talk about it, right? It's not. It's very difficult to have hope when what you see is not hopeful, right? And so, but you talk a little bit about who are the people who were there for you, right? Influenced you, supported you, challenged you, so that you can overcome and really build on resilience. That's been kind of the theme in your life.
Right, I think there's several people along my journey that helped. I think going to that program that was designed for students who were academically disadvantaged and financially disadvantaged, that program saved me. And I give them credit today. Had it not been for that program, I wouldn't be where I am. So programs like Face to Face is extremely important because you're saving people's lives. And not just them, the next generation. My kids, I say, you're privileged. You're privileged. And they recognize their privilege. And they recognize that they have an obligation to help other people. Because had it not been for other people, they wouldn't be where they are today. So I think that several people, that program won, the dean of that program, professors at college. So you get good people along the way. And even law school. When I wanted to go to another law school, the dean I never met, Caucasian man, said, don't go here, go to Georgetown. When I was about to take a job at Arthur Anderson, that was a big accounting firm, because I was an accounting major. And she said, Bruce, we want to hire you and we think you could be a partner here, but what do you want to do? I said, I want to go to law school. She said, don't accept this job. And so I was like, God, this is a lottery ticket to me and my family. But she said, don't take it. Go straight to law school, because if you don't, you're never going to make it. So follow your dreams and your passion, regardless of the sacrifices. Because I tell people all the time, you're best at what you enjoy doing. And all the other benefits will follow. So just do what you're passionate about, regardless of what people say. There's nothing but noise. You got to get rid of the noise, the negative noise. So I think those are the things. Right? Just people in your journey is going to help. Face to Face is the beginning of many other resources and support that you get.
Thank you, Bruce. I think one of the big things that you and I have been talking about is services, support. Those are all important things. But there's also needs to be work around changing the systems. It may not be possible for this generation, but that work has to be available and be there. We need to work on both ends, right? Like not just with the individual, but the system that's making all these things possible has to be dealt with too. So could you please kind of...
Yeah, people don't like to talk about the system, particularly if you work for a company like Microsoft. They're like, you talking about the system. Listen, it's not about Microsoft. My journey is not about Microsoft. Let's get that straight, right? Microsoft's been good to me, but I've been good to Microsoft. I think so. It's really about being honest, right? So we can all tackle the problem, not the symptom, the real problem. And the problem is the system of inequity that exists. Just take a step back. When I tell people, when I speak to people in corporations or any institution, I say, okay, sometimes you look at people like myself and people that come up in rural America or urban America, and you say, you're not working hard enough. I said, if you really think that's true, why don't I call Mayor Adams in New York City and see if we can get you and your family an apartment in public housing. And don't stay there for a day, but stay there for an extended period of time. And you tell me if you think your kids will be successful and you wouldn't have challenges. That's just the reality of it. But you can't just go visit and drop by and say, okay, I understand it. No, we can find a place for you and your family for an extended period of time to really see the impact of how that impacts your lives and the opportunity and resources that are available for your kids. And you'll come out realizing there's very little resources. Of all my friends, I'm the only one who went to college. It's not for the lack thereof. It's the resources. And you just don't see it to believe it, right? They just don't see it. And so that's one of the reasons I go back to encourage them, but more importantly, let their kids see me, right? To try to get the next generation. So it's extremely important for those who are serious about helping to help. I mean, we got to get away from talking and the system that we have in place. We're talking about criminal justice reform. Come on, if someone's committing a minor crime, why are they in jail? Because it's an industry. People don't like to talk about that either. It's an industry that people don't want to dismantle because it employs so many people. So you can't have it empty, because if you have it empty, people are going to say, how can I eat? How can I send my kids to college? So you got to continue to have the product go through the system. those are things that people don't like to talk about. At this point, I have nothing to risk to talk about. No one can really do anything to me to talk about it because it's the truth. And I think people who are benefiting need to hear it, and people who are a victim of it need to hear it, because we need to work together if you're really serious about it, and support programs, again, like Face to Face.
Thank you. So the next two questions are about what would you like to say to young people, things that you probably have mentioned, this is your opportunity. What would you like to say?
I think I said a lot of it already, but the reality is, I think, look at me as you, really. I mean, I am them, right? And I tell them all the time, I'm your uncle, I'm your brother, I'm you. I'm no different. I'm not second generation, I'm first. In many cases, I would say that my beginnings may be more difficult than yours. How I grew up, right? We grew up extremely, extremely poor. Assistance, food stamps, cheese, free clothes, free shoes. We got everything free because we had none. And I told you about my educational background. I was just fortunate to get in. Went to 4 schools my entire life. So it's possible, despite all of that. And all I ask the system, society, to do is just give everyone the resources so they can reach their own individual potential. That's it. Why is that so difficult? Well, part of it is because we live in a capitalist society. But good people should step up in a big way to make sure. I just was working out early this morning, looking out my hotel, the windows, and I saw homelessness. And the first thing that came to my mind is that person was a kid at one point, but a kid who just did not have the opportunities or the resources. So you feel guilty sometimes, saying, I did it, but that person did it. But it's just too many people who didn't make it. And you have to ask yourself, why? It's not because black, they don't want to. People want to live a better life. No one wants to live in public housing. People want more than that. Sometimes people think that's all they want. It's just an apartment and a project. No, we want more than that. That's just the baseline. So it's about really people, everyone, taking a role from a policy standpoint and financially supporting organizations. We have to do both. And we can't afford to lose another generation of what I consider brilliant minds, people who live in rural and urban areas. So we got to show them that it's still possible. And that's why I do it. I can just give the books out and not be here. But it's just more impactful for them to see and feel me. It's hard to scale, but it's just more impactful. And I'm tired at times. But I have to get used to being tired. Because I think my journey is different. Microsoft got good 24 years out of me. But the next period of my life is different. Right? So I think that I'm all in. Because I think that it's an obligation that I have to help other people. And I get a lot out of it. I tell my friends, I said, it's great making money, but it feels good when you meet somebody and you change their life. I said, that's a great feeling. And not only that, you're changing their family's life. So I feel good about that. So yeah, I think we just all have to come together and realize there's a problem. Young kids, just keep pushing through. Keep pushing through. Keep pushing through. It's possible. But we have to do both. We have to get them to push through so we don't lose them. And we have to try to change the system so it's better.
Thank you. I know you also talked about this too, but you could summarize again, really, in terms of, because you talk a lot about legacy, that it is not just about us. What this world, our community, and it's really about the young people, the young generation. That's why face-to-face exists. And so, in terms of what you talk about, what is the responsibility of community? Again, what does that mean? What do we do as a community? It's not just one person's responsibility, one organization, but it's really talk a lot about that. So if you could just summarize again, what are the things that we could do collectively to make things better as we kind of overcome our challenges?
I think there are a lot of things. I think one, support organizations like your organization. I think two, corporations need to step up in a big way. I was just talking to someone. I said, listen, corporations sometimes have philanthropy arm, it's a field arm, right? And I said, however, when you approach companies, even those organizations internally, they don't tell you, but they don't look at what's my return on investment. That's what a lot of them have that. Like, what I'm giving this, but what do we expect to get in return? When you start talking about things like this initiative, it takes a long time. You're not getting it right away. So I think companies need to step up in a big, meaningful way. And I think we need to challenge companies, right? And don't let them escape that stuff, right? I think when I started thinking about George Floyd, everyone made all these huge promises, but they never really spent that money, right? So we let them get away with that, right? And now, because of the climate that we're in, the reality is people don't even want to talk about it. D&I, they don't want to talk about it anymore, right? Because of the political climate. But I think we have to challenge them and make them talk about it, right? Because after all, if you're a consumer, you have more power than you actually think, right? So I think companies can easily support programs like this and say what we'll do is provide some sort of training, right? That's your ROI, right? You're investing in training youth for certain jobs in your corporation. So all you have to do is think. I tell people, I should tell my team, just think big, bold, and out of the box. Companies who are successful do that. Strategically think big, bold, and out of the box all the time, right? I used to take time with my team and say, let's take 2 days off of work and let's think about how we can solve a problem that can potentially generate income. It's no different. Companies can take time off and figure this stuff out in terms of contribute to it in a meaningful way. But I think we have to hold people accountable. People who look like you and I, accountable. Oftentimes we have positions and we don't do anything, right? And people hate when I say that as well, right? They always think it's the Caucasian man we should focus on. Yeah, but they too have to play their role. But we too, women and people of color, when we get in positions, we have an obligation to, right? Not just to look at D&I in terms of what it can do for us. We have to look at what it can do for the masses. So I think there's just an obligation across the board for everyone.
Well, thank you. We could go on and on and on and really talk all night. And I think I heard you say that your next place to live is Minnesota?
Anything's possible. Anything's possible.
So as you acknowledge that publicly, I would like to thank you really for your time, for your willingness to just have this conversation, be with us all day today, and just so appreciate you and good luck.
No, thank you. And thanks for having me here.
Yeah.
I want to give you a chance. Does anyone have a question for Bruce that they'd like to ask?
I have a question.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your story. I have a question. First, were you going like Mercer Island or in Belgium? You got arrested. I spent some time in Seattle, so I'm familiar.
No, I got arrested in New York.
Oh, I thought you said, but while you
I was with Microsoft, an employee at Microsoft.
and they still arrested, right? But you exude authenticity, and I appreciate that. In the various spaces that you've been able to be. Can you speak a little bit about how you've been able to balance code switching and maintain that authentic self that you are presenting?
You know, people ask that all the time. I'm gonna tell you what my philosophy has always been. I can always go back home. You know, I can always go back home. I'll share a quick story with you. I was a tax assessor at Georgetown. I was second year, you get a job, right? So my professor said, hey, you're great at tax, work for this tax law firm. And so for the summer, I did, right? And of course, they had people from Harvard and Yale for the summer, but I just knew tax because I was an accounting major. I knew better than all of them, right? I knew it. So he took us all out to lunch, the name part of this firm. I'm not going to mention the firm. Big firm. And he said, he's talking to someone, and he said, he turned to me for whatever reason, I don't know, he said, well, Bruce may know something about the ghetto. And I was like, okay, I learned early in life that you pause before you say anything, right? And so that's what I did. I just paused and I said to myself, I'm not gonna have this job. And mind you, this job at that point was paying top salary, right? And I said, well, I'm not gonna have it. I said, listen, Mr., I called him by name. I said, Mr. name. I said, well, I don't know anything about the ghetto. Now, mind you, I could have taught, and it was everyone at the table on occasion, right? Partners, everyone. I said, and I said, well, I don't know anything about the ghetto. I could have told all of them anything they wanted. I said, I don't know anything about the ghetto. Well, perhaps you can tell me something about it, and you can share with everyone at the table. And everyone at that point realized how serious it was, dropped their head, and within 2 minutes we exited. And by the time I got to the firm, all the other partners were apologizing to me. And then it came time for them to, and I didn't care because I said, I can go back home. I'm not going to ever put money beyond dignity and pride. Me, that's just me. So when you say code switching, if you go to Microsoft now, they'll say, that's Bruce, right? Now, I don't know what they say behind my back, but they know it's me, and it will always be me, right? And so even at that job, so they had to make an offer. And I said, I know more than any of these Southern associates. And so they finally made me the offer, be a tax attorney there. And my best friend said, Bruce, I know you're not going to take that job. I said, man, I'm a black guy in America practicing tax law. There are not many people practicing tax law and who are black. So wherever I go, I'm going to have to deal with it. So let me deal with the evil that I do know. And so I took the job. Now, I would say that after about 2 years, he and I going back and forth, because we were going back and forth. The name partner of a firm, big firm. And we're going back and forth, like, how do you know about this? I said, God, I learned that in my first year at law school. We want me to teach you that. That's how the relationship was. I'll teach you how to do it. But after 2 years, I said, okay, that's enough. And they never had any black person that worked for firms. So I would never, well, I clearly won't do it now, but it's hard being the only black person in an environment like that. But I think the reality is, to answer your question, I always think I can go home. Like, I look at that stuff, I'm going to be who I am, right? And I'm going to advocate for other people, women and minorities. Like I said, my team, when I supported a $20 billion team, my team was made up of 15 women, 7 were African Americans, 3 African American males, 2 Asian males, 2 Latino males, 2 Caucasian males, and me. Extremely diverse, right? And wasn't unapologetic about it. And I didn't do the hiring, my team set the culture. Like, we got to give everyone an equal opportunity to get a job through interviews. That was it. And they hired folks like that. And to me, it sent a message not just externally, because they said, you got these folks managing $20 billion, that's more than most Fortune 500 companies, right? And then even internally, people were like, Bruce, your team's not going to hire another woman. I said, I wasn't paying any attention. They said, they're watching you. I said, when I was the 3rd African American hired here, they were watching me then too. So it's no different. So I think that's why I said you got to do what you can do, because it's going to come a point where you're not going to be able to. And I always said to myself, and I tell my colleagues at Microsoft, when I sit on the bench in Central Park, when this is over, I don't want to say I have a regret. I want to say I did it the way it should have been done. It's not going to be, I regret not being able to do more.
I'm going to pose questions or observations. I appreciate you turning and looking at that side of the room. That's the first time you face that side of the room. I thank you for it, because I think you were pitching for help everywhere, but you spent a lot of time looking for young people
Right.
addressing that. I noticed that, and I appreciate that. So I just want to say that.
No, thanks.
Anybody else?
If you could pull one policy lever to create more equitable opportunities, what would it be?
It would have to be around education, right? Funding education and underprivileged communities and rural communities, right? I think, and right now, we're making sure broadband. We have affordable broadband, it should be free. And urban settings, because we have the infrastructure. See, the difference, I'm gonna tell you, one of the things about writing the book, it's amazing the calls I get from people in rural America. You may say, this black guy is not just talking about supporting people of color. I'm talking about equity for people, right? So I get a lot of calls from people from rural America who don't look like me and say, Bruce, how can we help? I get what you're saying now. Finally, you're right. Rural America, in some cases, are worse off than urban America. And I'm just being honest with you, because they don't have the infrastructure. So I would say, let's make sure we put the infrastructure in rural America, right? And make it free, and make sure we make broadband and urban area free. Because we don't, because in urban areas, they have the infrastructure, we can't afford it. You're gonna pay rent, or you're gonna get broadband. You're gonna pay rent. So let's make sure everyone has it, because with the advent of AI, you're just furthering that gap. So I think broadband is the baseline that should be had in rural and urban America. And just pour more money in the educational system to make it happen.
Thank you, Bruce. Now, he's going to be here to sign books, and you can add more questions. You have a chance if you have something you don't want to ask in front of everybody. We'll give you some time here in a few minutes. But thank you. I want to just...
Thank you.
Let's give him- So,